That's not going to happen. But it could, I said. Ashley and I talked to Margaret. She explained that appeals were common in murder cases, that David had every right to file one, that it would probably be denied, but we should prepare for the possibility of going through everything again. Ashley was devastated. I can't do it, Austin. I can't sit in that courtroom again and listen to them dissect what our parents did. I can't watch them try to twist it into something other than murder. You might not have to, Margaret said gently. Appeals rarely result in new trials. The standard for overturning a conviction is very high. David's lawyer would have to prove serious errors were made during the original trial. But for months, it hung over us like a storm cloud. The appeal was filed. The court reviewed it. David's new lawyer argued that crucial evidence had been mishandled, that Susan's testimony should have been excluded because of her plea deal, that the forensic analysis was flawed. The appellate court heard arguments on a Tuesday in November. I attended with Margaret. Ashley couldn't bring herself to go. The judges asked questions. David's lawyer stumbled on some answers. The prosecution was rock solid. 3 weeks later, the decision came down. Appeal denied. The conviction stood. David would serve his full sentence. I called Ashley. She cried with relief. It's really over now, right? It has to be over. It's over, I promised. But the truth was, it would never be completely over. Trauma doesn't work that way. You don't just survive something terrible and then move on like it never happened. It becomes part of you. It changes the shape of your life. I still had nightmares sometimes. Dreams where my mother was alive and David was chasing her through the house. Dreams where I was 2 years old again, crying in my crib while my mother lay dead at the bottom of the stairs. Dreams where I opened my mouth to scream and nothing came out. Riley would wake me up gently. You're safe. You're here. It was just a dream. And I'd believe her. But the dreams kept coming. Ashley had her own nightmares. Her own triggers. The sound of shouting. The smell of whiskey. The sight of grocery bags, because that's what David had been carrying the night he killed Jennifer. We learned to live with it. That's what survivors do. We learn to carry the weight without letting it crush us. We learn to function around the pain. We learn that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about integrating, taking the broken pieces and building something new with them. The foundation grew. We helped more women. We saved more lives. Every woman who escaped because we gave her resources. Every child who grew up safe because we helped their mother leave. Every life that continued because we intervened. That was Jennifer's legacy. That was what came from her death. Ellie started asking more questions about Grandma Jennifer as she got older. Why did she die? Was she sick? Riley and I had talked about how to handle this. We decided on honesty, age-appropriate but truthful. Grandma Jennifer was hurt by someone who was supposed to love her. She died because of that hurt. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. But her life meant something. She loved your daddy very much and she tried to protect him. Who hurt her? Ellie asked. Someone bad, I said. But he's in jail now. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Ellie thought about this. Did you know him? I did, I said carefully. But I don't see him anymore. And I never will again. Good, Ellie said firmly. People who hurt other people should stay in jail forever, out of the mouths of babes. James was too young to understand any of it yet. He just knew he had 2 grandmas in heaven, Eleanor and Jennifer, and we talked about them sometimes. He liked looking at photos of Eleanor's garden and hearing stories about how she used to grow tomatoes bigger than his head. Normal life. That's what we'd built. A normal, stable, boring life where the most dramatic thing was James refusing to eat vegetables or Ellie getting in trouble at school for talking during quiet time. I worked. Riley worked. The kids went to school. We had dinner together every night. We watched movies on weekends. We took vacations to the beach and the mountains and Disney World. We were aggressively, defiantly normal. But underneath it all, the history remained. The weight of everything that had happened. Everything we'd survived. It was always there. We just got better at carrying it. Ashley had a baby girl. They named her Jennifer, after my mother. Little Jenny looked nothing like her namesake, but Ashley swore she had Jennifer's spirit. Strong and stubborn and brave. Sophie and Jenny and Ellie and James became a pack. 4 cousins who played together constantly. Who built forts in the backyard and put on shows for the adults, and fought over toys and made up immediately after. They were growing up in a family that loved them. That would never make them question their worth. That would never treat them as less than. That was the victory. Not the inheritance. Not the trial. Not David rotting in prison. The victory was these 4 kids who would never know what it felt like to be unwanted. Who would never have to wonder if they belonged. Who would grow up safe. Margaret died peacefully in her sleep when she was 74. We found out 2 days later when her law partner called. She'd left instructions for her funeral. Simple. No fuss. Donations to the Jennifer Caldwell Foundation in lieu of flowers. At the funeral, I learned things about Margaret I hadn't known. She'd been married once, briefly, in her 20s. She'd lost a daughter to domestic violence when she was 40. That's why she'd become so close to Grandma Eleanor. That's why she'd fought so hard for Jennifer's case to be reopened. She was fighting for her own daughter, too. for the justice she'd never gotten. I gave the eulogy. Margaret was the kind of person who changed lives quietly. She didn't seek attention or praise. She just did the work. She helped people. She fought for what was right. And she made sure that when my grandmother died, the truth came with her. I'll never be able to repay what she did for me, for my mother, for all of us. But I'll try. I'll keep the foundation going. I'll keep helping people the way she helped me. That's how I'll honor her. Ashley cried through the whole service. So did I. We'd lost another piece of our support system, another person who'd believed in us when no one else did. But we kept going, because that's what you do. You keep going. 3 years later, I got a call from the prison. David was sick. Stage 4 lung cancer. He had maybe 6 months left. He wanted to see me. I said no immediately. But the chaplain called back a week later. Mr. Caldwell, your father is dying. He's asking for a chance to make peace before he goes. I'm not saying you owe him anything, but I'm asking you to consider whether you might regret not seeing him one last time. I talked to Riley about it. She left the decision up to me. You're the only one who knows what you need. I talked to Ashley about it. She said absolutely not. He doesn't deserve your time or your forgiveness. I talked to Dr. Hammond about it. She asked what I thought I might gain or lose by going. What would it give you to see him? What would it cost you to refuse? I didn't know the answer. In the end, I went. Not for him, for me, because I needed to look at him one more time and confirm that he had no power over me anymore. That he was just a dying old man who'd made terrible choices and was facing the consequences. The prison escorted me to the infirmary. David was in a bed surrounded by machines. He'd lost at least 50 pounds. His skin was gray. He looked like a ghost. "Austin," he said when he saw me. His voice was weak. "You came. I'm here. That's all you get." He nodded. "That's fair." He coughed, a wet rattling sound. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted to tell you one thing before I die." "What?" "I loved your mother," he said. "I really did, and I killed her anyway. That's the truth. I loved her, and I was so angry that she was leaving that I pushed her. I didn't mean for her to die. I just wanted her to stop talking about leaving, to stop saying she was taking you away from me. So I pushed her, and she fell, and she died. And I've spent every day since then knowing I destroyed the only person who ever really loved me." Tears were running down his face. I felt nothing. "I made myself into a monster," David continued. "I treated you like garbage because I hated that you looked like her, that you reminded me of what I'd done. Susan enabled it because she was afraid of me. Logan and Ashley went along with it because they didn't know any better. And your grandmother saw right through all of it. She knew what I was. She knew what I'd done. And she made sure you'd be okay after she was gone. She saved you when I tried to destroy you." He reached toward me with a shaking hand. "I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry." I looked at his hand. "I didn't take it. You don't get to die with a clear conscience. You don't get to confess and feel better. You killed my mother. You stole my childhood. You're the reason Logan is dead. You're the reason Ashley struggles every single day. You did that. You chose that. And now you get to die knowing exactly what you are. A murderer, an abuser, a failure." David's hand dropped. His face crumpled. "You're right. You're absolutely right." I stood up to leave. Then I turned back. "One more thing. I have a family now. A wife and kids. They're never going to know you. They're never going to visit this prison or hear your excuses. You're nothing to them. Just a story about why we don't tolerate violence. Why we don't make excuses for abuse. Why we protect each other. That's your legacy. Being the example of what not to be." I walked out. I didn't look back. 3 months later, the prison called to tell me David had died. Did I want to claim the body? No, I said. Cremate him and dispose of the ashes. I don't care how. They did. Wherever David's ashes ended up, I never knew. I never asked. My stepchildren said they answer only to their biological parents. So, I changed the locks, canceled every privilege in my name, and told their father pickup was tonight. No one argued. I'm Tom, 35, and I've been married to Lisa for 18 months. She has 2 kids from her first marriage, Dylan, 17, and Sophia, 15. Their biological father lives about 40 minutes away and sees them maybe twice a month when he feels like showing up. When Lisa and I got together, I genuinely wanted to be the stepdad I never had growing up. My own father walked out when I was 12, so I knew what it felt like to need a father figure. I thought being a good stepdad meant being the yes man. Always supportive, always generous, always understanding. New school clothes, sure, no problem. Concert tickets for Sophia's favorite band. Of course. When Dylan wanted the latest gaming setup, I dropped $800 without blinking. When he crashed my car last month after staying out past curfew, I didn't even make him pay the $500 deductible. But respect, that was a completely different story. It started with small things. You're not our real dad. Became their go-to response whenever I asked them to do basic household tasks. When I'd ask Dylan to take out the trash, he'd say, I only listen to actual parents. When Sophia left dishes piled in the sink for days, she'd shrug and say, "My mom didn't tell me to clean them." Lisa would have talks with them about respect, and they'd apologize and behave for maybe a week. Then, we'd be right back to the same pattern. The breaking point came last Friday. I decided to leave work early to surprise Lisa with dinner plans for our anniversary weekend. I pulled into the driveway around 3:00 the afternoon and immediately knew something was wrong. There were cars I didn't recognize parked on our street, and I could hear music blasting from inside the house. I walked through my front door to find about 20 teenagers having a full-blown party in my living room. Red Solo cups everywhere. The coffee table pushed against the wall. Kids I'd never seen before eating food from my kitchen. My house was completely trashed. Broken lamp. Mysterious stains on my white couch. Empty bottles scattered everywhere. Dylan was in the center of it all, acting like the king of the castle. When he saw me, he didn't even look embarrassed, just annoyed that I'd shown up. "Party's over," I said loudly. "Everyone out now." The music stopped. Kids started grabbing their stuff and heading for the door, but Dylan didn't move. "Clean this mess up immediately." I told him once the house was empty. He actually laughed. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my father. This is my house, Dylan. My couch that's ruined. My lamp that's broken." "No," Sophia interrupted, appearing from the kitchen. "It's Mom's house too. We live here. We only take orders from real family, not from some guy Mom married." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The door to my home office was wide open, and I always kept it locked. I walked over and immediately saw that my safe was open. My emergency cash envelope, the one where I'd been saving money for Lisa's surprise birthday trip to Hawaii, was completely empty. $2,000 gone. I turned around slowly. "Where's my money?" Dylan shrugged with this smug expression. "What money? I don't know what you're talking about." "Prove we took it," Sophia said with a smile that made me realize this wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was theft. I stood there staring at these two kids I'd been supporting for over a year. Kids who ate my groceries, used my electricity, lived under my roof, and had just robbed me blind while throwing a party in my house. Something inside me switched off. Not anger, just cold, clear understanding. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith. "I need all my locks changed today. How soon can you be here?" Then I called their biological father. "David, it's Tom. Come get Dylan and Sophia tonight. Bring a truck because they need to take everything they own. They're not welcome in my house anymore." "What happened?" he asked. "Ask them. You have 2 hours." I hung up and turned to find Lisa standing in the doorway. She'd come home early. She looked at the destroyed living room, at her children, then at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Dylan, Sophia, go to your rooms." They didn't move. Now, they left reluctantly. Lisa waited until we heard their doors close. Then she walked to me slowly, reached into her purse, and pulled out papers. "I've known about the disrespect for months. I hired a private investigator last week." She dropped the folder on the ruined coffee table. "What I found out about what they've been doing wasn't just stealing from you." I picked up the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. The first page was a credit card statement. Not mine, not Lisa's. Dylan's name was on it. A card I'd never seen before with a $3,500 balance. The charges made my stomach turn. Online gambling sites, cash advances, liquor stores, all within the last 3 months. "Keep going," Lisa said quietly. The next page was worse. Screenshots of text messages between Dylan and his friends. Planning parties at our house. Coordinating when I'd be at work. They'd done this 5 times. 5 different parties while Lisa was working late shifts at the hospital and I was supposedly safely at the office. The stolen money wasn't a one-time thing. It was systematic. "He's been taking cash from my purse for months," Lisa said. I thought I was going crazy, misremembering how much I had. The investigator set up a hidden camera in our bedroom last week. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. Dylan, walking into their bedroom like he owned it, going straight to Lisa's dresser, taking bills from her wallet. The date stamp showed Tuesday, 3 days ago. "There's more," Lisa said, and her voice finally cracked. The investigator had followed Dylan and Sophia to places they told us they weren't going. Dylan wasn't at basketball practice last Thursday. He was at a house party 2 towns over where police broke up a fight and found drugs. 3 kids were arrested. Dylan left 10 minutes before the cops arrived. Pure luck he wasn't caught. Sophia's pages were different, but just as bad. She'd been cutting school with her boyfriend. The one 9-year-old boyfriend neither of us knew existed. The one who'd been driving her around in a car registered to someone with a criminal record for assault. The investigator had photos of them together. Of Sophia getting into his car after saying she was going to study group. "I've been making excuses for them for years," Lisa said, "telling myself it was the divorce, that they needed time, that we just needed to be more understanding." She looked at me with red eyes. "I've let them disrespect you because I was afraid if I chose you over them, I'd lose them. But I already lost them. They're not who I raised them to be. Or maybe they're exactly who I raised them to be by never holding them accountable." I heard a car door slam outside. David had made good time. I already told him everything, Lisa said. Sent him the investigator's report this morning. He tried to make excuses. Blame me for being too strict. Blame you for being a bad influence. Then I told him if he didn't come get them tonight, I was calling the police about the theft and showing the gambling records to the judge to modify our custody agreement. The doorbell rang. Lisa answered it. David stood there looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished somehow. Behind him was his girlfriend Candace, the one Dylan and Sophia claimed was so much cooler than their mom. Where are they? David asked. Packing, Lisa said. They have 1 hour. Anything left behind gets donated. You can't just kick them out, Candace said. They're minors. I can remove them from a home where they've committed theft and are facing consequences for their actions, Lisa replied. They'll be living with their father as per our custody agreement, which states he can have them full-time if I'm unable to care for them. Right now, I'm unable to care for them without compromising my marriage and my mental health. Candace opened her mouth, but David put his hand on her arm. He saw something in Lisa's face that made him back down. Dylan came down first, dragging 2 duffel bags. His expression was different now, not smug anymore, almost worried. He looked at the folder still open on the coffee table, and his face went pale. You hired someone to follow me? I hired someone to document what you were doing with the freedom and trust we gave you, Lisa said. Get in your father's truck. Mom, I can explain. Get in the truck. Sophia appeared on the stairs, crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she'd used before. Mom, please, I'm sorry. We didn't mean. You didn't mean to get caught, Lisa interrupted. That's different from being sorry. You've had 18 months to be sorry, to change, to show even basic respect to Tom, who's never been anything but kind to you, who paid for your clothes and your food and your activities and asked for nothing in return except basic human decency. We'll do better, Dylan said. We promise. Your promises mean nothing, I said. It was the first time I'd spoken since David arrived. You've made promises every time your mom talks to you about your behavior. Then, 3 days later, you're back to the same patterns. I'm done. Your mom is done. You're going with your dad, and maybe living without someone to steal from and disrespect will teach you something. David flinched at that. Candace looked uncomfortable. Let's go, David said quietly. Get your stuff in the truck. The locksmith arrived as they were loading the last of their things. Perfect timing. Dylan watched the man start changing the locks on the front door with an expression I couldn't quite read. Reality setting in, maybe. Sophia tried one more time, grabbed Lisa's arm as she was walking to the truck. Mom, please don't do this. I'll be better. I promise I'll be so much better. Lisa gently removed her daughter's hand from her arm. I love you. That's not going to change. But love isn't enough anymore. You need consequences. You need boundaries. You need to understand that actions matter. Maybe your father can provide that. Maybe not. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep watching you hurt the people who care about you and pretend it's fine. You're choosing him over your own kids, Dylan said bitterly. I'm choosing my sanity over enabling your bad behavior, Lisa corrected. There's a difference. They left. David's truck pulled away with Dylan in the passenger seat and Sophia in the back, both staring out the windows. Candace followed in her own car. The locksmith finished with the front door and moved to the back. Lisa and I stood in our destroyed living room, broken lamp still on the floor, stains on the couch, the safe in my office still hanging open and empty. I'm sorry, Lisa said. For what? For not doing this sooner, for making excuses, for letting it get this bad. I pulled her close. She buried her face in my shoulder and started crying. Not quiet tears, full-body sobs that shook both of us. 18 months of frustration and guilt and anger and fear all coming out at once. We're going to be okay, I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. The locksmith finished and handed us new keys. 4 sets. I paid him in cash from my wallet since the emergency fund was gone. He looked at the destroyed living room but didn't ask questions. That night, Lisa and I cleaned in silence, threw away the broken lamp, scrubbed the stains with carpet cleaner, put furniture back where it belonged. Around midnight, her phone started ringing. David's number. Don't answer it, I said. She looked at me. What if something's wrong? Then he can text. The phone went to voicemail. Rang again immediately. Lisa put it on silent and set it face down on the counter. We went to bed exhausted. Lisa fell asleep almost immediately, but I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the credit card debt, the gambling, the parties, the theft, how long it had been going on right under our noses. My phone buzzed.
The man who demanded I terminate my pregnancy had genuinely changed, but I kept hearing his words to his parents. Financial trap, child support, control. If you love them, don't move across the country. If you love them, don't keep me from building a life. We stared at each other. Both of us right, both of us wrong. I need to take them home. I gathered both boys and their things. Finn walked us to the door. He knelt down and hugged them both so tight. I love you guys. See you Wednesday, okay? Okay, Daddy, Mateo said. Silas nodded. In the car, I couldn't think straight. 3 states away. Modified custody. Summers and holidays. I called Gideon as soon as I got home. He answered on the 3rd ring. Josie. What's wrong? Finn's moving to Portland. He wants to modify the custody arrangement. Gideon was quiet for a moment. When is he moving? End of next month. And he wants what exactly? He said he'll fly back for his weekends, or I can send the boys to him for longer visits. He wants to go back to court. Okay, here's the reality. He has a legal right to relocate for employment. The court won't prevent him from taking a job, but they can modify the custody arrangement to account for distance. What does that mean? Usually, one extended visit during summer, alternating major holidays, maybe one weekend a month if he's willing to do the travel, plus video calls. That's barely any time. That's long-distance co-parenting. It's not ideal, but it's what happens when one parent relocates. Can I stop him? You can argue that the relocation isn't in the children's best interest, but unless you can prove he's doing it to avoid parenting responsibilities, the judge will probably allow it. He's doing it because I'm dating someone. Can you prove that? I thought about his words. I saw the photos on Instagram with your new boyfriend. Maybe. Then document everything. Every conversation, every text. If he makes any statements connecting the move to your personal life, we need that on record. I spent the rest of that night going through my phone. Finn hadn't texted anything incriminating, but I remembered his face when Mateo mentioned Asher, the way he'd changed after that weekend. Wednesday evening came. Finn picked up the boys for his scheduled dinner visit. When he brought them back at 8 p.m., I stopped him at the door. I want you to reconsider the move, Josie. I'm serious. The boys need consistency. They need their father present, not on a screen. I can't turn down this opportunity. It's what I've been working toward. More important than your children? Why does it have to be a choice? Why can't I have both a career and my kids? Because you're making it a choice. You're choosing a job across the country over being here for them. He ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to do? Stay here, in a dead-end position, watching you build a new life with someone else? This is about Asher. It's about me finally having the chance to start over. You don't get to start over. We have children. This is our life now. Your life. You get to have Asher, and your friends, and your perfect little apartment. I get every other weekend and Wednesdays. You won. Isn't that enough? I stared at him. I didn't want to win. I wanted my children to have two parents who were present. Well, now you'll get what you actually wanted. Them all to yourself. He left. I stood in my doorway shaking. That night, I called my mom for the first time in months. She answered on the first ring. Josie, Finn's moving to Portland. He's leaving the boys. Silence. Then, what can I do? I don't know. I started crying. I thought he changed. I thought he actually loved them. Maybe he does. Maybe he loves them and still can't stay. That's not love. Sometimes people make selfish choices even when they love someone. It doesn't mean the love isn't real. It just means they're human. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. Gideon prepared a strong case. Finn's sporadic involvement during pregnancy, the overheard phone call, his minimal participation in the first year, and now this sudden relocation right after I started dating someone. We walked into that courtroom ready for war. Finn was there with his lawyer, Mr. Keating. He looked exhausted. Judge Northfield reviewed both motions. Mr. Brennan, you're requesting modification of the custody arrangement to accommodate a relocation to Portland, Oregon. Why Portland? Why Portland? I received a job offer, Your Honor. It's a significant promotion with a 40% salary increase. And you accepted without consulting with Miss Harding about the impact on your children? I informed her as soon as I accepted. That's not what I asked. Did you consult with her before accepting? Finn shifted. No, Your Honor. I didn't think I needed to. You share custody of twin toddlers. Every major life decision impacts them. You didn't think you needed to consult their mother? I have a right to pursue career opportunities. You do. But you also have responsibilities to your children. Help me understand why this opportunity couldn't wait until the boys are older and better able to handle long-distance visitation. Finn's lawyer stood. Your Honor, Mr. Brennan has been an exemplary co-parent for the past 9 months. He's never missed a visit, never failed to pay support, has maintained consistent involvement. He's not abandoning his children. He's simply relocating for employment while proposing a modified schedule that allows continued contact. Miss Harding, you oppose this relocation? Gideon stood. Yes, Your Honor. We believe this relocation is not about employment but about Mr. Brennan avoiding consistent parenting responsibilities. On what basis? Mr. Brennan only decided to relocate after learning Miss Harding had started dating someone new. He made statements to Miss Harding indicating jealousy and resentment over her moving on with her life. Judge Northfield looked at Finn. Is this accurate? I mentioned that she was dating someone, but that's not why I'm moving. This is purely a career decision. When did you start job hunting in Portland? Finn hesitated. About 2 months ago. And when did Miss Harding begin her new relationship? Another pause. Around the same time. Quite a coincidence. It wasn't because of that. I'd been unhappy here for a while. Unhappy because you have to co-parent every other weekend? Unhappy because my entire life here is a reminder of what I lost. The courtroom went quiet. Even his lawyer looked surprised by that admission. What did you lose, Mr. Brennan? Finn looked at me for the first time since we'd entered the courtroom. Her? I lost the woman I was supposed to marry because I said something stupid that I didn't mean. And now I have to watch her fall in love with someone else while I'm stuck being the part-time dad who sees his kids 4 days a month. You're not stuck. You have custody every other weekend and every Wednesday. That was court-ordered, yes. But you could have requested more time. You never did. because I knew she wouldn't agree. Judge Northfield turned to me. Miss Harding, would you have agreed to a more balanced custody schedule if Mr. Brennan had requested it? I thought about it. Would I have? Or would I have fought to keep them mostly to myself? I don't know, I admitted. Why not? Because I didn't trust him. I still don't. He told his parents he was marrying me for financial reasons. That our children were a trap. I can't forget that. Have his actions since the custody hearing given you reason to distrust him? No, I admitted. He's been consistent. But consistency doesn't mean he wants to be there. Mr. Brennan, the judge said, do you want to be there? For your children? Finn's voice cracked. Yes. Then why are you moving to Portland? Because I can't do this anymore. I can't watch her build the life we were supposed to have. I can't keep showing up every Wednesday to an apartment that was supposed to be our home. I can't keep loving kids who won't remember me as anything more than the guy who picks them up sometimes. I felt something twist in my chest. You think they won't remember you? They're 18 months old. In a few years, I'll just be the voice on the phone. The guy they visit in summer. They'll call her boyfriend Dad and I'll be Finn. Judge Northfield leaned back in his chair. Here's what I'm going to do. Mr. Brennan, I'm denying your relocation request. Finn's face went white. However, I'm modifying the custody arrangement. You'll have the children 50% of the time. 1 week on, 1 week off. You wanted more time with your children? You've got it. Your Honor, Finn's lawyer started. I'm not finished. Both of you are going to attend co-parenting counseling. 6 months minimum. You're going to learn how to communicate without resentment, how to put your children first, and how to build a functional co-parenting relationship. If, after 6 months, you still want to relocate, Mr. Brennan, you can file a new motion and I'll reconsider. But right now, those boys need their father present, not on a screen. Present. He banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. I sat there, stunned. 50-50 custody. My boys would be gone half the time. Gideon touched my arm. This isn't what we wanted, but it's not the worst outcome. He gets exactly what he asked for? How is that not the worst outcome? He didn't get to move. That's what matters. The boys stay in the same city as both parents. Everything else, we can work with. Finn and his lawyer left quickly. I sat in that courtroom for a long time after everyone else had gone. When I finally made it to my car, I called Asher. How did it go? He's staying, but he gets them half the time now. That's good, right? They need their dad. I don't know what they need anymore. I thought I was protecting them. Maybe I was just protecting myself. Josie, you're a good mom. The best. Whatever happens, those boys are lucky to have you. I wanted to believe him. The first week of the new custody arrangement started the following Monday. I dropped the boys off at Finn's apartment with their little suitcases full of clothes and toys and diapers. They ran to him like always, excited to show him a leaf Mateo had found. Finn looked at me. I'll send updates. Okay? And Josie? I'm sorry. For all of it. Me too. I left before I started crying. Drove home to an apartment that was too quiet. No little voices. No toys everywhere. No one needing me. Vera came over that night. You okay? I have to be. That's not the same as actually being okay. I curled up on the couch. Do you think I did the right thing? Fighting so hard to keep them from him? I think you did what any mother would do. You protected your kids. Or I punished him, I can't tell anymore. Maybe it was both. Maybe it had to be both. That week lasted forever. Finn sent photos every day. The boys at the park. The boys eating dinner. The boys in their pajamas ready for bed. On Thursday, he sent a video. Both boys saying goodnight to me through the phone. Night, night, mama, Silas said. Love you, Mateo added. I watched that video 20 times before I could sleep. Friday evening, Finn brought them home. They ran to me with stories about the zoo and ice cream and a dog they'd met at the park. Did you have fun with Daddy? So much fun, Mateo said. Daddy built us a big tower and we knocked it down. I looked at Finn. He was smiling. A real smile. Maybe the first genuine one I'd seen from him in months. Thank you, I said, for the updates. Of course. Same time next Friday? Yeah, same time. He left. I spent the weekend with my boys, soaking up every minute, knowing in 6 days I'd have to give them back. The co-parenting counseling started the next week. Finn and I sat in a small office with a therapist named Dr. Ramona Chen. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Tell me why you're here. We both started talking at once. She held up a hand. One at a time. Finn, you first. I feel like I've been punished for the past year, for being honest about my fears, for not being ready when we found out about the pregnancy. I've done everything right since then, but it doesn't matter. She still sees me as the guy who wanted to run. Josie? I overheard him tell his parents he was marrying me for financial reasons, that our children were a trap. Everything since then has felt like an act, like he's just going through the motions because a judge told him to. Dr. Chen nodded. So Finn, you feel unforgiven. Josie, you feel unable to trust. How do we move forward from here? Neither of us had an answer. We spent 6 sessions talking in circles. Finn insisting he'd changed. Me unable to believe him. Dr. Chen kept pushing us to find common ground. You both love these children, she said in our 7th session. That's not in dispute. What is in dispute is whether you believe each other loves them. Finn, you think Josie doesn't believe you're capable of genuine love for your sons? Josie, you think Finn is incapable of loving them the way they deserve. You're both wrong. How are we both wrong? I asked. Because love isn't binary. Finn can love those boys and still resent the circumstances that brought them into his life. Josie, You can love those boys and still struggle with the fear that you're not enough on your own. Both things can be true. I felt something crack open in my chest. I never said I wasn't enough. You didn't have to. Everything you've done has been about proving you can do this alone. But you don't have to do it alone. That's what co-parenting is. After that session, Finn and I sat in the parking lot for a long time. Do you really think I'm just going through the motions? He finally asked. I don't know. Sometimes you seem present. Other times, I see that look on your face, like you're calculating the cost of being there. I'm not calculating anything anymore. I'm just trying to be a good dad. Why? He looked at me. What do you mean, why? Why are you trying? You didn't want them. You could have walked away. Why didn't you? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Because of you, he finally said. You were so certain, so fearless. You were going to have these babies with or without me, and I realized I didn't want to be the guy who walked away from that kind of love. I didn't love them yet, but I loved the way you loved them. And I thought maybe, if I stayed, I'd learn how to love them like that too. Tears were running down my face. Did you? Yeah, I did. It took time. But one night, when they were maybe 3 months old, Mateo was crying. You were asleep and completely exhausted. I picked him up and he just stopped, looked at me like I was his whole world. And I felt it. That overwhelming, terrifying, all-consuming love. It was like falling off a cliff. I'd do anything for these kids, Josie. Anything. I believed him. For the first time since the phone call, I actually believed him. I'm sorry, I whispered, for not giving you a chance to prove that. You were protecting them. I don't blame you. We sat in that parking lot until it got dark, just talking. About the boys, about our failures, about how we'd gotten here. When I finally drove home, I felt lighter somehow, like a weight I'd been carrying for 18 months had finally lifted. The co-parenting got easier after that. We started coordinating better, sharing funny stories about the boys, even having dinner together occasionally so they could see us getting along. Asher met Finn 3 months later. It was awkward at first, but they found common ground talking about football. He's good with them, Finn told me after Asher left. The boys really like him. Does that bother you? A little, but they love me too. There's room for both of us in their lives. 6 months after the court modification, we went back for our follow-up hearing. Dr. Chen submitted a report saying we'd made significant progress. Judge Northfield reviewed it and nodded. Mr. Brennan, do you still wish to relocate to Portland? Finn looked at me, then at the judge. No, Your Honor. I'm staying here. The job offer had been extended indefinitely. He could take it any time, but he wasn't going to. My kids need me here, he said, and I need them. Judge Northfield smiled, the first time I'd seen him smile. Good. Custody arrangement remains as modified. Dismissed. Walking out of that courthouse, Finn stopped me. I know I can't undo what I said that night, but I need you to know it was fear talking, not truth. These boys are not a trap. They're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I know, I said, and I meant it. 2 years later, the boys are 3.5. They split their time between Finn's apartment and mine. They have 2 birthday parties, 2 Christmases, 2 of everything. And they're thriving. Asher and I got married last spring. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Finn was invited. He came, even gave a speech about how lucky the boys were to have so many people who loved them. My parents and I reconciled slowly. They see the boys regularly now, though things between us will never be quite the same. But here's what I learned. Love isn't always simple. Sometimes people make terrible choices and still love you. Sometimes fear looks like resentment. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is forgive. Finn was a coward that night on the phone, but he's been brave every day since. And our boys have a father who chose to stay, chose to fight, chose to love them, even when it was hard. That phone call changed everything. But maybe, in the end, it changed everything for the better. Because now we're all exactly where we're supposed to be.
When the police told me my sister was dead, I thought it was a tragedy. Then they said I killed her. When the police showed up at my door after my sister disappeared, I thought they were going to tell me she was dead. What they said was so much worse. I texted Meredith 3 times on Tuesday and she didn't respond. By Wednesday morning, I drove to her apartment. The landlord said she'd moved out, taken everything, left no forwarding address. I went home confused. We'd just made plans for Saturday. Brunch at the place we'd gone every weekend since we were teenagers. Thursday morning, 2 detectives stood on my porch. We need to ask you some questions about a recent death. My heart stopped. I thought they'd found Meredith's body. Instead, one pulled out a photo of a man I'd never seen before. Do you know this person? I shook my head. They looked at each other with that cop look, the one that says they don't believe you. Can we come inside? We sat in my living room and the detective leaned forward. This man was found deceased in his apartment 2 days ago. We found your fingerprints on a kitchen knife at the scene. Your hair on his couch. Your credit card receipt in his trash. That's impossible. I've never seen him. I've never been there. They asked where I was Monday night. Home alone watching TV. No alibi. They asked if anyone had access to my belongings. That's when I realized. My spare key. Missing from the drawer last month. I'd assumed I'd misplaced it. My sister Meredith has been to my apartment. I said slowly. The pieces starting to connect. She's been missing since Tuesday. The detectives wrote down her information and left. Told me not to leave town. I spent that night going through my apartment. More things missing. A coffee mug. A scarf. A hairbrush I hadn't used in months. All things covered with my DNA. The detectives came back the next morning with photos from the crime scene. My scarf draped over the dead man's couch, my coffee mug in his sink with my lipstick on it, a receipt with my forged signature. Someone is setting me up, I said, voice shaking. The phone number you gave us for your sister is disconnected. The address is an empty apartment. We ran Meredith Collins and found nothing. No driver's license, no social security number, no records at all. That's impossible. She's my sister. We grew up together. Ma'am, according to your parents, you don't have a sister. The room tilted. I called my mother from the police station, hands trembling. Mom, tell them about Meredith. Tell them she's real. Silence on the line. Then, honey, who's Meredith? My sister, your daughter. Sweetheart, you're an only child. You've always been an only child. The detective was watching me. I could see what he was thinking. Unstable, delusional, dangerous. They held me for 48 hours while my lawyer scrambled. That's when the truth started emerging, piece by piece. My mother had given birth to twins, identical, but she'd only wanted one child. Meredith was given up at birth to a private adoption agency, records sealed. My parents never told me, never told anyone. They'd erased her completely. But Meredith found out. Somehow, somewhere, she'd gotten the records. She'd tracked me down 8 years ago, introduced herself at a coffee shop like it was coincidence, became my best friend before revealing she was my sister. I'd been so happy. A sister I never knew. A connection I'd always felt was missing. 8 years she'd played the role. 8 years of brunches and holidays and late-night phone calls. 8 years of collecting my hair, my fingerprints, my habits, my signature. The victim was her ex-boyfriend. Restraining order. History of stalking her. She'd planned his murder for years. They found her notebook in a storage unit registered under my social security number. Every page detailed how she'd frame me, how she'd disappear, how I'd take the fall for everything. The last entry was dated 1 week before the murder. She abandoned me at birth. She got the parents, the childhood, the life that should have been mine. Now she'll get what she deserves. She wasn't framing a stranger. She was punishing me for existing, for being the twin they kept. My lawyer got the charges reduced. Evidence pointed to Meredith, but she'd vanished completely. New identity, new country probably. She'd had 8 years to plan her escape. I'm out on bail now. The case is technically still open. They can't convict me with the notebook evidence, but they can't convict her either. She's a ghost. I sat at our brunch place last Sunday, force of habit, ordered 2 coffees before remembering. The chair across from me stayed empty. My sister spent 8 years becoming my best friend. 8 years pretending to love me. 8 years waiting for the perfect moment to destroy my life because our mother chose me instead of her. And somewhere out there, she's still watching. I check my locks 3 times before bed now. It's never enough. I sit in my apartment the morning after checking my locks for the 3rd time, staring at my phone and wondering if I should call my parents again, or if there's any point. My coffee sits cold on the table next to me. I haven't slept more than 3 hours. Every small noise makes me jump. My phone buzzes and I grab it too fast, nearly dropping it. Alexander Gates, my lawyer, is texting me. He wants me to come to his office because the forensic team found something else in the storage unit. My hands shake as I read the message twice. What else could there possibly be? I grab my keys and head out, checking behind me twice before getting in my car. The drive to his office takes 20 minutes but feels longer. I check my rearview mirror constantly, looking for cars that might be following me. Nobody is there. I know nobody is there, but I check anyway. At Alexander's office, his secretary waves me through immediately. He's waiting with a manila folder on his desk and his face looks tired. He shows me additional pages from Meredith's notebook that the forensic team found wedged behind a false panel in the storage unit. These pages are different from the ones about the murder plan. These pages detail how she studied my handwriting for 2 years before she felt confident forging my signature. There are practice sheets with my name written hundreds of times, each one getting closer to my actual signature. The progression is clear. Early attempts look clumsy and wrong. Later ones are almost perfect. By the final page, I can't tell which signature is mine and which is hers. The level of patience and planning makes my stomach turn because this wasn't impulse or anger. This was cold, calculated revenge spanning nearly a decade. Alexander points to dates written in tiny numbers at the bottom of each page. She started practicing my signature 6 years ago. 6 years of planning while we had brunch every Saturday. 6 years of perfecting my handwriting while I told her about my work problems and dating disasters. I feel sick. Alexander asks if I'm okay and I nod even though I'm not. He makes copies for me to take home and I don't know why I want them. But I do. Detective Swift calls later that day while I'm sitting in my car in Alexander's parking lot, still holding the copies. She tells me they've identified the adoption agency that handled Meredith's placement. It was called New Beginnings Family Services, and it operated out of Portland until it closed in 2003. The records are sealed by court order from 1995, which means my parents must have requested the seal. Swift is working on getting them unsealed, but it could take weeks or months depending on the judge. She sounds frustrated, and I can tell she wants to give me better news. I thank her and hang up, feeling frustrated that even now, my parents' decision to hide Meredith continues to block answers I desperately need. If they had just told me the truth from the beginning, would any of this have happened? Would Meredith have felt less abandoned if she'd known I didn't know about her either? I start the car and drive home on autopilot, barely remembering the route. I force myself to go grocery shopping because I've been living on delivery food for 2 weeks, and I need to reclaim some normalcy. The store is crowded with people doing their regular Wednesday shopping, and the fluorescent lights feel too bright. I grab a cart and head to the produce section, trying to remember what I usually buy. Apples. I need apples. I'm reaching for a bag when I see her. A woman with dark hair like Meredith's, standing by the tomatoes. My heart stops. She's wearing a blue jacket. Meredith had a blue jacket. The woman turns slightly and I see her profile. My hands start shaking. I abandon my cart right there in the middle of the aisle and walk quickly toward the exit. She turns around fully and I see her face. It's not Meredith. The woman is older with different features. Nothing like my sister except the hair color. I keep walking anyway. I can't stop. I get to my car and sit there for 10 minutes, my hands shaking too badly to put the key in the ignition. A security guard walks by and looks at me with concern, but I wave that I'm fine. I'm not fine. I drive home with no groceries and order Chinese food on my phone. That night, I finally read through all the police reports Alexander gave me about Caleb Sutherland, the man Meredith killed. The file is thick, maybe 50 pages. Caleb was 32 when he died. He worked as a sales manager for a tech company. He'd been arrested twice for violating the restraining order Meredith had against him. The first arrest was for showing up at her workplace. According to the report, he waited in the parking lot for 3 hours until she came out, then followed her to her car. She called the police and they arrested him right there. He spent 2 nights in jail and paid a $500 fine. The second arrest was 6 months later for following her home from a grocery store. He drove behind her for 12 miles and she called 911 while driving. The police met her at her apartment and arrested him in his car across the street. That time he spent a week in jail. The reports paint him as obsessive and threatening, someone who couldn't accept that their relationship was over. I realize Meredith chose a victim whose death might seem justified if she'd been caught. She could have claimed self-defense. She could have said he broke in and attacked her. The restraining order history would have supported her story. But she didn't plan to get caught. She planned for me to take the fall. I call my mother against my better judgment because I need to understand how she could give away a baby and then pretend that baby never existed. The phone rings 3 times and I almost hang up. She answers on the 4th ring, her voice careful and distant. I ask her directly why she chose to keep me instead of Meredith. The question hangs in the air between us. She's quiet for so long I think she's hung up. Then she says it was random. They just picked one. Her voice is flat, like she's talking about choosing between 2 identical apples at the store. I realize that's somehow worse than any reason she could have given. If she'd said I looked healthier or cried less or had a birthmark she loved, at least that would be something. But random? A coin flip that determined everything about both our lives? I ask her if she ever thought about the other baby, the one she gave away. She starts crying and says she tried not to. She says she had to believe she made the right choice or she couldn't have lived with herself. I tell her I have to go and hang up before she can respond. I sit on my couch and stare at the wall for an hour. My first therapy appointment with Fern Collier feels awkward and forced because I don't know how to explain that my best friend of 8 years was actually my twin sister plotting to destroy my life. Her office is small and painted a calming blue color. There are plants on the windowsill and tissues on the side table. She's maybe 50, with gray hair and kind eyes. She asks me to tell her what brought me in, and I start talking. The words come out jumbled and wrong. I keep backtracking to explain things out of order. She listens without judgment and asks me what I'm most afraid of right now. I tell her the truth. Meredith is still out there, still watching, and I have no way to protect myself from someone who knows everything about me. She knows my schedule, my habits, my favorite places. She knows which window in my bedroom doesn't lock properly. She knows I keep my spare car key in my desk drawer. She spent 8 years learning every detail of my life. Fern asks what I'm doing to feel safe, and I tell her about checking the locks 3 times every night. She doesn't tell me to stop. She says that's a normal response to trauma, and we'll work on managing the anxiety so it doesn't control my life. I cry for the last 10 minutes of the session, and she hands me tissues without making it weird. Alexander files a motion to have my bail conditions modified, so I can at least travel within the state. He argues that I'm clearly not a flight risk, given that I reported the framing myself, and have cooperated fully with the investigation. The prosecutor, Donovan Baird, doesn't oppose it, which Alexander says is a good sign that they're not seriously pursuing charges against me anymore. The hearing is scheduled for Friday morning. I wear a conservative dress and sit quietly while Alexander presents his argument to the judge. The judge is a woman in her 60s who looks stern but fair. She reviews the motion for what feels like forever but is probably 5 minutes. Then she approves it. Just like that, I can travel within state lines. I feel a tiny bit of freedom return, even though I have nowhere I want to go. Alexander shakes my hand outside the courtroom and tells me this is real progress. I thank him and drive home, feeling slightly less trapped than I did this morning. Detective Swift contacts me with news that they found surveillance footage from a gas station near Caleb's apartment. The footage shows Meredith filling up a car 2 hours before his estimated time of death. Swift emails me a screenshot from the video. The image is grainy but clearly shows her face. She's wearing my jacket, the brown leather one that went missing from my closet 3 months ago. I'd looked everywhere for that jacket. I'd assumed I'd left it somewhere and forgotten. But no, Meredith took it. She wore it to pump gas before murdering Caleb, making sure the cameras caught her in my clothes. This evidence further proves the framing, but it also confirms Meredith was meticulous about every detail. She thought about security cameras. She planned what to wear. She probably drove past that gas station multiple times to confirm it had cameras pointed at the pumps. Swift tells me this footage will help my case significantly. I thank her and stare at the screenshot for a long time. My sister is looking slightly away from the camera, her expression calm and focused. She looks like me. We have the same face, the same hair, the same build. Anyone who saw this footage would think it was me. I drive past the coffee shop where Meredith and I used to have brunch, but I can't bring myself to go inside yet. Instead, I park across the street and watch through the window as other people sit at tables and have normal conversations. A couple in their 20s laughs about something. An older man reads a newspaper while drinking coffee. A A woman types on her laptop, probably working remotely. None of them are wondering if the person across from them is secretly plotting their destruction. None of them are checking over their shoulders constantly. I sit there for 20 minutes just watching normal people do normal things. My hands grip the steering wheel tightly. I want to go inside. I want to reclaim that space and those Saturday mornings, but I can't make myself open the car door. Finally, I start the engine and drive away, feeling pathetic but unable to reclaim that space yet. Maybe next week, maybe never. The next morning, my neighbor knocked on my door around 8. I'd been up for hours already, checking the locks again and staring at my phone. She looked nervous, kept glancing down the hallway like she wasn't sure she should be here. She told me she saw someone who looked exactly like me leaving my apartment the day Caleb died. She'd thought it was me at first, but then she noticed the shoes. Black heels, the kind with the pointed toe. She said I always wore flats or sneakers, never heels like that. The detail seemed small, but it stuck with her, made her feel weird about it. When she saw the police at my door days later, she started putting things together. I thanked her 3 times, my voice shaking, and asked if she'd give a statement to Detective Swift. She agreed right away, said she'd call the detective herself that afternoon. After she left, I stood in my doorway for a full minute, just breathing. Someone else saw Meredith. Someone else could prove I wasn't the one at that apartment. Alexander called me 2 hours later with more news from the forensic team. They'd found Meredith's fingerprints in my apartment, but not in normal places. Inside my medicine cabinet, way in the back where I kept old prescription bottles I never touched. Inside my dresser drawers, underneath the clothes. In the back of my closet, behind boxes of winter stuff I hadn't opened in months. She'd been going through everything, taking inventory of my entire life. The analyst told Alexander it looked like someone conducting a search, not just visiting casually. I felt sick hearing this. Meredith had touched my things, moved them around, studied what I owned. She'd been in my bathroom, my bedroom, my private spaces. The framing felt almost easier to process than this. She'd invaded every corner of my home while pretending to be my sister, my friend. Alexander asked if I was okay, and I lied and said yes. I wasn't okay. I wanted to throw away everything I owned and start over in a place she'd never been. 3 days later, I sat in Donovan Baird's office downtown. The building was all glass and steel, modern and cold. Alexander came with me, sat beside me in the chair across from the prosecutor's desk. Donovan looked tired, like he'd been working too many cases for too many years. He told me directly that his office wasn't going to prosecute me. They were preparing to dismiss all charges formally. The evidence pointed clearly to Meredith now, and they were shifting all their resources to finding her. He apologized for what I'd been through, said he understood this had been horrible for me. I should have felt relieved. Alexander squeezed my shoulder, smiled at me, but I just felt empty. Clearing my name didn't undo what Meredith did. It didn't explain why she hated me enough to plan this for 8 years. It didn't bring me any closer to understanding how someone could pretend to love me while plotting my destruction. I thanked Donovan and left his office feeling hollow instead of free. My second therapy session with Fern happened on a Thursday afternoon. Her office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs, the kind of place designed to make you feel safe enough to fall apart. We talked about my sleep, my anxiety, the constant checking of locks. Then she asked me what I missed most about Meredith. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the betrayal, on the anger and fear, that I hadn't let myself think about missing her. But sitting there in that quiet office, I admitted the truth. I missed having a sister. I missed the feeling of having someone who understood me completely, who knew my history and my quirks and loved me anyway. Then I started crying. Big ugly sobs that I couldn't control. Because that person never existed. Everything I thought we shared was just Meredith studying me like I was some kind of experiment. Every laugh, every secret, every moment I thought we were connecting was her taking notes for my destruction. Fern handed me tissues and let me cry until I couldn't anymore. She didn't try to fix it or make it better. She just sat with me in the grief of losing someone who was never really there. Detective Swift called me the following week with news about the adoption records. She'd gotten them unsealed through a court order. Meredith had been placed with a family in Oregon right after birth. They returned her to the agency after 6 months. The paperwork said she was difficult and hard to manage as an infant. She spent 2 years in foster care after that, moving between different homes. Then a couple in Washington adopted her when she was 3. They raised her until she turned 18, but the detective said there were notes about behavioral problems and running away. My parents' decision to give her up created this whole childhood of abandonment and moving around. I got to stay in one house, with parents who wanted me, going to the same school and having the same friends. Meredith got returned like a broken product, shuffled around, never settling anywhere. I understood her anger better after hearing this. I still couldn't forgive what she did, but I understood where it came from. One random choice at birth gave me everything and gave her nothing. I forced myself to go back to work on Monday. The marketing firm where I'd worked for 3 years felt different now. Everyone knew what happened because it had been in the news. My coworkers were awkwardly nice, giving me space but also checking on me constantly. Sarah from accounting brought me coffee without asking. Mike from creative told me to take my time on deadlines. My boss called me into her office and told me to take whatever time I needed, that my job was secure. I insisted on working because sitting at home thinking about Meredith all day was making me crazy. I needed tasks, deadlines, normal work problems to focus on. By Wednesday, I'd finished 2 projects and felt almost like myself again. Work gave me structure, gave me something to do besides obsess over where Meredith was hiding. Alexander met me for coffee that Friday to update me on the investigation. He told me Interpol had been notified about Meredith. Her photo was distributed to law enforcement in dozens of countries, but he was honest with me in a way I appreciated. People disappear successfully all the time. especially when they've been planning it for years like Meredith had. She probably had multiple fake identities set up, money hidden in offshore accounts, an exit plan as detailed as her framing plan. The chances of finding her were slim. Even if they did locate her, getting her back to the country could take years. Extradition was complicated and slow. I stirred my coffee and watched the foam swirl. Alexander looked at me with genuine sympathy. He said he was sorry, that he wished he had better news. I told him I appreciated his honesty. At least I knew what I was dealing with. Meredith was gone, probably forever, and I had to figure out how to live with that. The nightmares started that week. Every night I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, convinced Meredith was standing at the foot of my bed watching me. I'd turn on every light, check every window, test every lock. Then I'd lie awake until sunrise, too scared to close my eyes again. The bags under my eyes got darker each day. I looked exhausted all the time. Fern told me this was a normal response to trauma, that my brain was processing the violation of trust and safety. Knowing it was normal didn't make it less scary. I was tired constantly, could barely focus at work. I started drinking coffee all day just to stay awake. My hands shook from the caffeine and the lack of sleep. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked older, worn down, like I'd aged 5 years in the past month. My father called me for the first time since everything came out. His voice sounded strained, like he'd been practicing what to say. He tried to explain their decision. They were young when we were born, only 23. They were scared and broke, and the doctors told them raising twins would be twice as hard. They thought they were making the practical choice, the responsible choice. I listened without saying much because nothing he said would make this okay. We both knew it. The silence on the phone stretched out between us. Finally, he asked if I'd come to dinner this weekend. I told him I needed more time. He said he understood, but I could hear the hurt in his voice. I felt guilty, but also angry. They created this situation. They gave away my sister and never told me. Their guilt didn't fix anything. The coffee shop owner reached out to Detective Swift a few days later. Alexander called to tell me what she'd said. She remembered Meredith asking detailed questions about me over the years. What time did I usually arrive for brunch? Did I always order the same thing? What did I talk about? At the time, she thought Meredith was just being a caring sister, paying attention to my habits. Looking back, she realized Meredith was gathering information, studying my patterns. The owner felt terrible about it, offered to testify if Meredith was ever caught. I told Alexander to let her know she had nothing to feel guilty about. How could she have known? How could any of us have known? Meredith was that good at pretending, that patient in her planning. She fooled everyone, including me, for 8 solid years. I started going through my apartment the next morning, room by room, pulling out anything Meredith had ever given me. The necklace she'd bought me for my birthday sat on my dresser, a simple silver chain with a small pendant. I picked it up and looked at it for a long moment before dropping it in the trash bag. A throw pillow she'd said would match my couch perfectly went in next. 3 books she'd recommended, each one with her handwriting on the inside cover saying she thought I'd love them. A framed photo of us at a concert. A coffee maker she'd replaced when mine broke. Each item felt contaminated now, like touching them might somehow connect me back to her plans. I worked through every drawer, every closet, every shelf. By the time I finished, the trash bag was full and my apartment looked bare. The empty spaces on my shelves and walls made the place feel hollow, but at least I could breathe without seeing reminders of her everywhere I looked. I tied up the bag and carried it down to the dumpster, feeling lighter with each step away from my building. Detective Swift called 3 days later while I was at work. She asked if I could come to the station after my shift ended. I agreed and spent the rest of the day distracted, wondering what new information they'd found. When I arrived that evening, Swift led me to the same interview room where this whole nightmare had started. She spread photos across the table, showing a rundown motel about 30 miles outside the city. The sign out front advertised weekly rates and cable TV. Swift explained that they'd traced Meredith's movements in the weeks before Caleb's murder. She hadn't been living at the apartment address she'd given me at all. She'd been staying at this motel, paying cash every week, using a fake name. The clerk barely remembered her, said she kept to herself and never caused any problems. Swift showed me more photos, surveillance footage from the motel parking lot showing Meredith coming and going at odd hours. She'd been creating the illusion of her normal life with me while actually preparing for everything. The murder, the framing, her disappearance, all of it planned from that cheap motel room while I thought she was living her regular life across town. I stared at the grainy images of my sister walking to and from a motel room I'd never known existed. Swift said they'd searched the room after Meredith left, but it had been cleaned completely. No evidence, no clues about where she'd gone next. My therapy session with Fern the following week felt different. I told her about finding the motel photos, about how Meredith had been living this secret life right under my nose. Fern listened carefully, then introduced me to a concept I'd never heard before. Ambiguous loss, she called it. Grief for someone who isn't dead but is permanently gone from your life. She explained that it's often harder than regular grief because there's no closure, no funeral, no clear moment where you can say it's over and start moving forward. The mourning process never really ends because part of you keeps waiting for resolution that might never come. I sat with that idea for a while, feeling it settle into place. That was exactly what I was experiencing with Meredith. She wasn't dead, but she was gone in every way that mattered. I couldn't grieve her like I would a death because she was still out there somewhere, still a threat, still unresolved. Fern said naming these feelings sometimes makes them easier to carry. I wasn't sure I believed her, but having words for what I was going through did make me feel slightly less alone in it. A letter arrived at Detective Swift's office 2 weeks later, forwarded to her from the Washington couple who had adopted Meredith when she was 3 years old. Swift called me to come pick it up. The envelope was thick, several pages of careful handwriting on nice stationery. I sat in my car in the police station parking lot and read it. The couple expressed deep regret for not being able to help Meredith work through her abandonment issues when she was growing up. They described her as a difficult child who became increasingly troubled as a teenager. She'd run away multiple times, refused therapy, pulled away from any attempt they made to connect with her. At 17, she'd disappeared for good, and when she turned 18, she'd sent them a single letter saying she didn't want any further contact. They respected her wishes, hoping she'd reach out when she was ready. They had no idea she'd found me or what she was planning. The letter ended with an apology, as if they somehow could have prevented all of this if they'd just tried harder or done something different. I folded the pages carefully and put them back in the envelope. These people had tried to give Meredith a home, a family, a chance. She'd rejected all of it because it wasn't the life she thought she deserved. The life I had instead of her. Alexander called me at work the next Monday. His voice sounded pleased when he said the prosecutor's office had officially dismissed all charges against me. The case was closed as far as I was concerned. I should have felt relieved, maybe even happy. Instead, I just felt numb. I thanked him for his work, told him I appreciated everything he'd done. He surprised me by saying he planned to continue helping me pro bono if Meredith was ever located. He wanted to pursue any civil remedies we could, make sure she faced consequences for the identity theft and fraud, even if the murder charges were complicated by her disappearance. I didn't know what to say. Most lawyers would have moved on to their next case, but Alexander seemed genuinely invested in seeing this through. I told him I was grateful, and I meant it. The charges being dismissed should have felt like a victory, but my life was still destroyed in every way that mattered. My reputation was damaged, my sense of safety was gone, and my sister was out there somewhere, free and unpunished. My coworkers invited me to happy hour that Friday, trying to include me in normal social activities again. I forced myself to go, determined to prove I could still do regular things like a regular person. The bar was loud and crowded, everyone laughing and complaining about work stuff that seemed so trivial compared to what I'd been through. I lasted about 30 minutes before the noise became overwhelming and I had to leave. Everyone else was having conversations about difficult bosses and annoying clients and bad dates. Their problems felt so normal, so manageable. I stood there with my drink, feeling like I was watching them through glass, unable to connect with a world where the worst betrayal was a cheating boyfriend or getting passed over for a promotion. I made an excuse about not feeling well and left early. In my car, I sat with my head against the steering wheel, frustrated by how damaged I felt. Meredith had taken away my ability to just exist normally with other people. My mother showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. I saw her through the peephole and almost didn't open the door. Curiosity won out over anger. She looked older than I remembered, more gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes. She was carrying a cardboard box, and when I let her in, she set it on my coffee table without saying anything at first. Inside were old photos from when I was a baby. She sat next to me on the couch, and we looked through them together. 2 identical infants in every picture. One in a pink onesie, one in yellow. One being held by my father, one by my mother. She pointed to a photo and admitted she didn't know which baby was which. They'd dressed us differently to tell us apart, but in these pictures, she couldn't remember which outfit belonged to which twin. We could be looking at photos of me or photos of Meredith, and there was no way to know. She said something that made my stomach turn. She sometimes wondered if they'd accidentally sent home the wrong twin from the hospital. If maybe I was actually Meredith and Meredith was actually me. I stared at her, not knowing how to respond to that. The idea that our entire lives might have been swapped by chance, that she might have kept the wrong daughter and given away the one she'd meant to keep. It shouldn't have mattered, but somehow it made everything feel even more random and cruel. Detective Swift called me again a few days later with more bad news. They'd found evidence that Meredith had been using my identity to open credit cards and bank accounts over the past year. The amounts were significant. Nearly $50,000 that she'd never have to pay back because it was all in my name. Swift walked me through the accounts they'd found so far, but she warned there might be more they hadn't discovered yet. I felt sick listening to the list. Meredith had been building financial resources for her disappearance while destroying my credit and leaving me with debt I'd never agreed to. Alexander helped me file fraud reports with every bank and credit card company. We froze my credit, filed police reports, started the long process of proving I hadn't opened these accounts. He explained it could take months or even years to fully clear my name financially. The identity theft was just another layer of violation on top of everything else she'd done. Every time I thought I understood the full scope of her betrayal, something new emerged to show me it went even deeper than I'd imagined. Fern had recommended a support group for victims of stalking and identity theft. I'd been putting it off, not wanting to sit in a room full of strangers and share my story. But after learning about the financial fraud, I decided to give it a try. The group met in a church basement on Tuesday evenings. About 8 people sat in a circle of folding chairs. A woman around my age talked about how her ex-boyfriend had stolen her identity and destroyed her credit, opening accounts and taking out loans in her name before disappearing. The details were different from my situation, but the feeling she described was exactly the same. Having your life hijacked by someone you trusted. Feeling violated in a way that went beyond just the financial damage. When it was my turn to share, I gave a brief version of my story. I didn't go into all the details, just said my sister had framed me for murder and stolen my identity. People nodded with understanding that felt genuine. No one looked shocked or asked intrusive questions. They just listened and understood. For the first time since this started, I was in a room full of people who got it without me having to explain. The prosecutor's office held a press conference the following week, announcing that I'd been cleared, and they were actively searching for Meredith. My name was all over the news again. I had to take the day off work because reporters showed up at my office building trying to get a statement. They called my cell phone, sent emails, even knocked on my apartment door. Alexander handled all the media inquiries. He gave a brief statement saying I was relieved to be cleared and hoped law enforcement would locate my sister soon. I was grateful he dealt with it because I had nothing to say that wouldn't sound either pathetic or full of rage. The news coverage dredged everything back up. My coworkers, who had finally stopped walking on eggshells around me, went back to giving me sympathetic looks. Strangers recognized me at the grocery store. I stayed home for 3 days, ordering food delivery and ignoring my phone, waiting for the media attention to die down again. I took a week before I could make myself walk back to the coffee shop. The building looked exactly the same from the outside. Same brick walls and painted sign, but everything felt different now. I parked across the street and sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching people go in and out like it was any normal day. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I finally forced myself to get out and cross the street. The door chimed when I pushed it open. The owner looked up from behind the counter and her face changed immediately. She came around fast and pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. She smelled like coffee and vanilla. She pulled back and held my shoulders, looking at me with tears in her eyes. She said she was so sorry, that she never saw what was happening, that she'd answered questions from the police and felt sick about every conversation she'd ever had with Meredith. I told her it wasn't her fault. She insisted on making my usual coffee for free. I took it and looked at our table by the window, the one we'd sat at every Saturday for years. I couldn't sit there. I chose a different table near the back, facing the door so I could see everyone who came in. The coffee tasted the same, but drinking it alone felt wrong. I made myself finish the whole cup before leaving. When I told Fern about it at my next session, she said reclaiming spaces was an important part of healing. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I'd done it anyway. Detective Swift called 2 days later and asked me to come to the station. She had something to show me. I drove there with my stomach in knots, not knowing what to expect. She led me to a small room with a computer screen and pulled up security footage. The timestamp showed dates from 3 years ago. The footage was grainy black and white from a storage facility. She explained this was the place where they'd found Meredith's notebook. I watched the screen. A woman walked into frame and I recognized her immediately even though her back was to the camera. She unlocked a unit, pulled up the metal door and disappeared inside. Swift fast-forwarded through hours of footage. Meredith stayed in that unit for 3 hours that first visit. The detective showed me more clips. Meredith came back every few weeks over 3 years. Same unit, same routine. She'd rented it under a fake name and paid cash for everything, but the cameras had caught her face clearly in several shots. I watched her walk in and out, carrying notebooks and boxes, completely calm. She looked normal. She looked like my sister. Swift said the footage proved Meredith had been planning this for years, visiting regularly to work on her revenge plans. Watching her unlock the unit and spend hours inside made my skin crawl. She'd been doing this the whole time we were having brunch together, the whole time she was pretending to be my friend. Fern suggested I take a self-defense class. She said it might help me feel less helpless. I wasn't sure it would make any real difference because if Meredith came back, I doubted I could actually fight her off. But I signed up anyway at a gym 3 blocks from my apartment. The instructor was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and calm eyes. She was patient when I showed up, obviously anxious the first night. The class had about 12 people, mostly women, all different ages. Nobody knew my story, and I liked being anonymous. The instructor taught us basic strikes and how to get out of holds. The physical activity helped. I slept slightly better on class nights. My body was tired in a good way, instead of just exhausted from anxiety. The other students were friendly, but didn't ask personal questions. I could just be another person learning to protect herself. I went twice a week and started to feel a tiny bit less afraid walking to my car at night. My father called on a Thursday afternoon while I was at home. He asked if I was ready to talk to them both. I almost said no out of habit, but something made me say yes instead. I surprised myself. We agreed to meet at a restaurant downtown, neutral territory, not their house. I got there first and sat in a booth near the back. My parents arrived together 5 minutes later. They looked older than I remembered. My mother's face was puffy like she'd been crying. My father looked defeated, shoulders slumped. We ordered food none of us really wanted. The conversation was painful and awkward. My mother cried and apologized multiple times. My father kept saying they'd made a terrible mistake. They tried to explain their reasoning, but nothing they said made it okay. I realized sitting there that they were going to carry guilt about this for the rest of their lives. That didn't fix anything, but it was something. I told them I needed time before we could have any kind of normal relationship again. They both nodded and said they understood. They accepted it without arguing. We ate in mostly silence. When we left, my mother hugged me tight and whispered that she loved me. I didn't say it back, but I didn't pull away either. Alexander called me into his office the following week with new information. He'd been digging into Meredith's background. He'd discovered she'd filed a legal name change 2 years ago. This meant she'd been operating under at least 2 identities, the name she used with me and whatever name she'd changed to legally. He showed me the court documents. The new name was Sarah Mitchell. Completely different. He explained this made finding her much harder because she could have multiple passports and identities layered on top of each other. She might have other names we didn't know about. The FBI was now involved because the identity theft crossed state lines. Alexander had been in contact with an agent who was working the case. But even the FBI admitted the trail was cold. Meredith had been too careful, planned too well. She could be anywhere in the world using any name. The chances of finding her kept getting smaller. My friend Rachel set me up on a blind date with someone she knew from work. I agreed because I was desperate to prove to myself that I could still trust people and have normal relationships. His name was Tom, and he was perfectly nice. We met at an Italian restaurant on a Saturday night. I was on edge from the moment I sat down. I analyzed everything he said for hidden meanings and lies. When he asked about my family, I gave vague answers and changed the subject fast. When he talked about his job, I wondered if he was really telling the truth or making it all up. I couldn't relax. My shoulders stayed tense the whole meal. I kept checking the exits and watching other diners. Tom noticed I was uncomfortable. He asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. We both knew there wouldn't be a second date. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, he was polite but distant. I got in my car and cried, frustrated by how much Meredith had taken from me. I couldn't even have a normal dinner with a nice person without falling apart. At my next therapy session, Fern and I worked on strategies for managing my paranoia and hypervigilance. She taught me grounding techniques for when I started spiraling into worst-case scenarios. She had me practice focusing on my 5 senses to stay in the present moment. She was honest that I might always have some level of anxiety about trust and safety, but she believed I could get to a place where it didn't control my entire life. I wanted to believe her. Right now, it felt impossible. Every time I started to relax, something would trigger me and I'd be right back to checking locks and watching strangers. Fern said healing wasn't linear. There would be good days and bad days. I just had to keep working at it. Detective Swift contacted me again a few days later. She said they'd identified 3 other people Meredith had contact with over the years, who might have information about her plans. They were interviewing each of them. One was a former co-worker who remembered Meredith talking about feeling abandoned by her birth family. Another was a therapist Meredith had seen briefly before stopping treatment. The third was a woman who'd lived in the same apartment building as Meredith years ago. Swift said none of them had seen this coming. They all described Meredith as quiet and private but seemed normal enough. Nobody had suspected she was capable of murder and framing her own sister. The interviews weren't giving them useful leads on where she might have gone, but they were building a fuller picture of who Meredith really was. I got a notification on my phone that someone had tried to use one of my credit cards in Mexico. My heart started racing immediately. I thought it might be Meredith. I called the credit card company with shaking hands. They explained it was regular credit fraud, not connected to my case. Someone had stolen the card number and tried to buy electronics. The incident sent me into a panic attack anyway. I sat on my bathroom floor using all of Fern's grounding techniques to calm